So I'm Nick, I'm a physiotherapist here at Thrive. Me and my wife, kind of like one of the 50% owners of Swell Physio, so me and my wife Chelsea run it. So I'm going to be talking to you guys about load management today. So it can be kind of in terms of how you would utilize this information. It can be kind of utilized for sport, in the gym, really however you want to utilize it to make sure you're optimally loading. So we're going to be going through basically how you can dictate and calculate if you're underloading your body. So if you're underloading it, you're not really building up resiliency to manage injury risk. If you're overloading it, you're putting yourself at a risk of injury. And then there's kind of a sweet spot where you should be, where you're kind of managing your injury risk. Injury risk is not foolproof, so we can't actually prevent injuries. We can only manage them or manage your risk of injuries. But sometimes injuries just happen. So we're going to go through this stuff, and then at the end, if you have any questions or concerns, we'll leave time. Some of the other talks have probably been pretty long. This one shouldn't be too bad. So yeah, we're going to be talking about stress management. So basically, what is acute and chronic workload? Has anybody heard of acute and chronic workload at all? Perfect. All good information. So where this came from, there was a guy in Australia, and I don't know if anybody's heard of AFL football. So Australian rules football, kind of a crazy sport. Yeah. So all of them were getting hamstring injuries, and their hamstring injuries weren't really getting better. So a guy named Tim Gabbett went over there and studied what was causing these hamstring injuries. So he put GPS trackers on all the footy players and then monitored basically how much they were running. So he came up with this ratio of tracking their acute and chronic workload. So what the workload means is, so workload is a stress. So whatever it might be, so if you're a baseball player, it might be how many swings you're doing. If you're a golfer, it might be how many swings you're doing. If you're a runner, it's probably how many kilometers you're putting on. If it's exercise, it's probably your volume, so your sets or reps or how many you're doing. So we're looking at your workload, so those stresses, and we're looking at them from an acute standpoint and a chronic standpoint. So from an acute workload, the acute workload is basically a sum over a week period. So it's the average over that week period. And then your chronic workload is basically what you're doing over a 4-week period. So the average of the acute week, and then if we take that over 4 weeks, that would be your chronic workload. Does that make sense? Yeah? Cool. So what we do is we then create a ratio out of that. So your acute versus chronic workload. So together they would kind of make your workload or how you're basing off of your performance. So the main concern is basically us figuring out what an optimal dose is, whether it's for your sport or for your fitness, and then kind of indicating whether you're at an injury risk or not. So injury obviously equals poor performance, takes us either out of sport, takes us out of the gym, and then we're not really working like we'd like to. And your load management basically is a way that you can increase this performance. So how would we track your acute versus chronic workload? So if we're talking about baseball, golf, or sport, we could count how many times you're swinging. So for a golfer, so for myself right now, I'm trying to get ready for the season. So I'm in a simulator probably swinging, and it tracks it for me like 150 times. So what I would say is, okay, I'm gonna swung 150 times in a week. Then I would track that, and I'd say, okay, I've swung 150 times every week, and so that would be my chronic workload. And then, so if I did that for a month, and then my weekly workload was 150. Well, 150 divided by 150 is 1. So my workload, or my acute versus chronic workload, would be 1. So basically what you do is you track these metrics for 4 weeks, like I said, and then that would create your chronic workload, and then you take the sum of your workload through a week, that would be your acute, and then you compare your acute to your chronic workload. That's going to give you your ratio. So what is the dosage we're looking for? So we take that acute workload, compare it to our chronic workload, and we're gonna get our workload performance ratio. So the higher the chronic workload, it's gonna protect against injury when the acute workload is similar to the chronic workload. So the numbers we are looking for, anything under 0.8, we are under training and we are increasing our relative risk of injury. Anything between 0.8 to 1.3, we are in that optimal workload zone. So we're at our lowest relative risk of injury, so we're in the sweet spot. Anything over 1.5, that's what we call the danger zone. So if we continue to strain our body at 1.5 repetitively, we are going to have a higher risk of relative injury. So it doesn't mean we're always going to create an injury, it just means we're at that higher relative risk of injury. So, we gotta look at strategic planning. So how could we actually implement this stuff? So consistency would be key. So if we're thinking about the gym, maybe we'd keep like a journal or a diary. Ah. Perfect. That's all my fault.
Great timing.
Right? So for the gym, we might look at trying to track basically through a journal. So we might keep sets, reps, and weights, and then that way we can kind of track on a weekly basis what we're doing for sets, reps, weights. So we have, if we're thinking of sets and reps, we're looking at our total volume. So volume would be a good way to track your acute workload and then work that into your chronic. Weight would be another way, so we could track how much weight we're using from week to week, and then we would just try and make sure that those ratios aren't under 0.8, not over 1.5, and we're staying in that sweet spot. So a journal would be a great way. There's lots of apps out there too. I'm not super familiar with all of them, but there are a lot of apps that we can track those things as well. Really what we're trying to do is we're just trying to maintain consistency. So we're just trying not to increase too fast in terms of like those acute increased workloads. So an example of this would be, let's say we're doing a deadlift and one week we did 125 pounds and we think, okay, we're really gonna get after it. The next week we go up to 250. Well, last time we've had a 2x increase in our workload, we have a pretty higher relative risk of injury, whether that's to a hamstring or a low back injury, whatever it might be. So that would be one way, is just to track. I think a journal is kind of a great way to do it. But yeah, apps are kind of the way of the future. You can probably even use ChatGPT to create a planning for you as well. Yeah, that's kind of acute versus chronic workload in a nutshell. And I just thought we could chat about it. I'm sure there's questions. Concerns, yeah. Anyway?
There's math involved.
It is math. Yeah, definitely is math. What's everybody's like main way of working out right now? Is there any runners? Runner? Yeah. Do you track your running right now at all? What's your method of tracking?
On my watch.
Watch? Perfect. Okay. Do you know off the top of your head what your acute versus chronic workload would be?
Well, I just went, I was doing 8K and now doing 10.
Okay.
4 days a week, so.
Perfect. Okay. So that would probably fall into the sweet spot. You're probably at like, let's do our math real quick. 1.25. So that would be an example of staying in that optimal loading zone. Good thing to keep in mind with runners. Yes, consistency is key, but change up your running pass. So a lot of people will run on the same running pass. Or if you run on treadmill, you want to actually change up your directions because you just continue to strain your body with the same stress. So running directions is a good one. Is everybody mostly weight training then? Okay, does anybody keep track in a journal, show of hands, what they're doing, or an app? Nice, okay, we got journal. Do you, off the top of your head, have you tracked any metrics lately where you can say whether you're falling into an optimal zone or not?
Yes. Kind of. I think probably probably by weight and reps.
Yep.
Yeah. Probably in around 1.1.
Perfect. Love it. Anybody training through injuries right now?
I'm all recovered.
Yeah. Love it.
I'm recovered, but now I got this one.
Cool. So injuries, your workload, the acute versus chronic workload ratios stay the same, but then we keep in mind a few other factors around pain. So one thing that I'd suggest is if you do happen to have any injuries come up, it's good to like stay in the gym and keep our body going. A lot of people just kind of stop. There's ways to train around it, or there's ways to listen to our pain. So sharp stabbing pain usually means the tissue is not tolerating the load well. So usually sharp stabbing pain we try and avoid. So my general rule of thumb is green light, yellow light, red light. Red light, sharp stabbing pain, stop. Doesn't mean you have to completely stop. You might just stop and then reevaluate if there's ways to modify it, if it's something that you would want to do. If you modify it, so whether it's a range of motion, or you take off load, or you change up your rep scheme, but it's still a sharp stabbing, then you'd have to stop. Green light, yellow light is kind of where we want to live with injuries. So yellow light would be no pain during the activity, but then afterwards we might be a bit sore. If that soreness goes away within about an hour, we've probably worked in a pretty decent zone. If that pain lasts days and days, then we probably train too hard, and that goes injury or no injury. Green light is basically no pain during, no pain after. The only thing with green light is that we have to figure out if we're under training. So are we living in the 0.8 where we don't really have any symptoms? A lot of people get scared away by like achy pain. Achy pain is actually healing, especially after we go to the gym. Achy pain is going to be the inflammation that our muscles create. So gym is actually creating micro trauma to the muscle. Body goes in, creates inflammation to basically build up that muscle, and then we get more fibers and more muscle bundles basically, and then that's how we create more muscle and more strength. People try and avoid achy pain by taking Advil, ibuprofen, things like that, because in our culture we've shown that on TV that when you have something aching, you take that, but actually they're showing that you would heal 2 times quicker if we avoided it. So we actually try not to take Advil or things like that anymore, if we can stay away from it. If you're having trouble sleeping, obviously. Any questions about if you're trained through an injury? Does that make sense? Green light, yellow light, red light? Does everybody feel comfortable implementing that? Like if you wanted to implement acute versus chronic workload tomorrow, would you be able to do it? Or do you have questions?
Like we'll look at your slides. So like I just want to look at the numbers again.
Yeah, I could
Yeah.
send. Does Kayla have everybody's email and stuff?
Yep, yes.
Cool. I can what I can do is I can just get together like information, and then it'd just be something that you could just print off and stick into a journal if you want to track it. And then that way you have like all your metrics that you want to do, how you'd calculate it, and then your acute versus chronic load. How you basically just determine what you've done over the 4 weeks, and then what you've done over a week, and then put that in. Yeah. Cool.
Will you just do 1 week for weight training?
Yeah.
So many reps, and just to show us.
Yeah. So basically what you do, cool. Okay, so let's say we started next week. So from Monday to Sunday, I went into the gym 3 times, and let's just for ease sake, we're talking about our squats. So we're doing barbell squatting, and let's say on average we took our sets and reps. So let's just say we did over the course of the week, each day we did 3 sets of 15. So our total volume of reps would be 45. That make sense? Okay, so that would be week 1. So let's say each week we added 2 reps. So let's say we did 3 sets of 17 the next week, and we did that all the days. So that's 51. Then let's say, so we did 45, 51, and then let's say we did 56, and we did 60. So that would be our, and then we did that. So that would be week to week over a 4-week period. How many reps we were doing? Still tracking? Okay, so then we divide that by 4. Our chronic workload is 53 reps. Make sense? Our acute workload was 45, because that was our first week, or like our week was 45. We're at 1.1%, 1.2. So you can do this month to month. You can do it every 4 weeks. So let's say we did the next week and we did 45, so we did 51, 53, 55, and then we say we did 60. Divide that by 4, so now we're at 54. But now our first week was 51 instead of that 45, right? So like you could do this again the next week. Now we're at 1. So as long as you're staying above 0.8 and under 1.5, you're tracking well. Let's pretend like all of a sudden you were like, it's summertime, I gotta get ready for the beach. I'm gonna do 80 squats. And so we have 50, 55, 56, and then 80. Now we're kind of creeping up a little bit, but you can just monitor and see if you're gonna fall into that above 1.5. So all of a sudden we kind of jump from like 1 to 1.2. Something to probably keep in mind is your recovery as well. So if you're doing these multiple days in a row and you're getting sore, something to keep in mind is some people just like keep pushing. Your rest days are actually how your body recovers. So you want to actually take days off of the gym. Maybe you come in and walk, maybe you come in and stretch, but you do want to give yourself a break from workloads. I don't know, has the personal trainers talked to you guys about progressive overload and stuff like that? So this goes like hand in hand with your progressive overload. So this is a way to monitor that your progressive overload is effective and you're not overdoing it or underdoing it. This is like really easy just to like track your progressive overload and then track whether you're falling into an optimal minimum effective dose. Did they talk about this at all with their progressive overload? Yeah. So this would pair super well with progressive overload. Yeah. Did they talk about taking 2 weeks off after every training cycle? You should have a deload period. Yeah, so after so let's say you did like 4 to 6 weeks of strength training, and then you switch that strength training up to hypertrophy training, and then you change the hypertrophy training up into like endurance training. Does everybody know the difference between those trainings?
No.
Oh, goodness. What are these guys doing? Okay, so strength training, we're probably working at about 80 to 90% of our maximum effort. So maximum effort would be 1 rep max. Everybody familiar with 1 rep max? Yeah. So a very easy way to calculate this, if you don't want to take the time to actually go into the gym and just figure all this stuff out, does everybody know what the RPE scale is? Okay. Rating of perceived exertion. Let's bring that up. So I've done some studies on rating of perceived exertion. Rating of perceived exertion actually is, you'll see me booking 16 times at Pheasant back there.
When do they open?
I think Wednesday.
Weather dependent.
Weather dependent. Don't even talk to me about it. Okay, rate of perceived exertion. So just Google this, very easy way. This is another one, print off, put into your journal with my acute versus chronic workload stuff. So if I say I am working out at a, oh my goodness, 9, so really, really, really hard, I'm lifting something that feels like it's pretty close to my maximum effort, I'm working at 90% of my 1 rep max. Super simple way to do this without actually going and getting your 1 rep max or calculating your 1 rep max. You can actually just look at this after an exercise or a workout and say, did I do that effectively? So strength training should be working somewhere around like 8 to 9. So after you're done, you should probably do like 3 to 4 sets of 3 to 6 reps. of a workload that you feel is 8 to 9 out of 10. Hypertrophy training, you're working at like 3 sets, 4 sets of 8 to like 12 rep range. There's like a ladder where some of these things cross over, but we'll just talk about this for ease sake. You're probably working at like a 5 to 7. Okay? That's gonna be 50 to 70% of your 1 rep max. 50% is gonna be on the lower end, you're probably getting like more of those 12 reps, 70 is probably more like the 8 reps. Endurance training, so strength training is building more muscle fibers, so we're basically trying to move more load. Hypertrophy training is, again, more just focused on not necessarily increasing your strength, but just increasing the number of fibers that we have. So they kind of go hand in hand. If we have more muscle fibers and then we train those muscle fibers to move more workload, then we get bigger muscles, more strength. Endurance, we're probably falling more like 3 to 5. So this is where we're kind of moving 3 to 4 sets, and we're doing this probably 15 to 20 reps. Very small work or load, and we're trying to basically increase the endurance of those muscle fibers. It's so important for runners. So runners actually want to probably do a very good mixture of all 3 of those things. Everybody should, but running is a very good example of where we need strength and endurance. There's a lot of activities out there, but running is a good example where we just usually runners don't do a ton of it. They actually just run and think they'll get strong that way, where they should be in the gym too. So then what you do is you go through those 3 things, and then you'd have a deload period. So you'd actually take 2 weeks off where you either go very, very light, so your activity should only fall into like 1 to like 3. So your gym exercise should be easy, and then this would fall hand in hand with your acute versus chronic workload. So we would actually have a deload period where we reduce the stress on our body and let it recover, and so we don't actually increase our risk of injury as well. So this all goes hand in hand with like your progressive overload stuff. So your progressive overload should look at structured training where you're not doing the same training all the time. So you should be doing a mixture of strength training, hypertrophy training, endurance training. You should be monitoring your acute versus chronic workload, and then you should have deload periods, and then you just do it all again. And that's how you continue to create adaptations to your body. Because your body will plateau, it will get used to the same adaptation you're putting it under, and then we just stagnate. If we're not tracking these things, then we just kind of stay circulating, and then we sometimes we don't know why the gym's not being effective for certain things or different things like that. This would be why, because we're just not tracking our numbers appropriately. Yeah. Questions or concerns about that? Does that make sense? How that all kind of goes together? What did they talk about with progressive overloading in a nutshell? Does anybody remember?
Like 2 weeks ago.
That's fair.
It was basically, don't add extra weight, add extra reps first
Yep.
before you move on to a heavier weight
Nice.
kind of breakdown.
Yeah, so that's kind of perfect too, where you can track with your, so like to go to your question, Donna, about like what you're tracking for your acute versus chronic workload, you could look at whether you're adding more reps or if you're adding different weight. And then if you're doing multiple things, then you could just track both of them and make sure that one of them isn't falling outside of the zone. So weight training gets a little bit tricky. Running's easier because you can just track your mileage for a week. Weight training gets trickier because you might be changing up your rep ranges, you might be changing up your weights. You probably want to track both and make sure one isn't going north or south too much, and making sure you're still sticking in the zone. So, yeah. That's probably good. I don't need to talk to you guys all night. They say an hour, but no way.
I have a question. It has nothing to do with any of this. Who is the cute baby? Tell us about the baby, because we keep seeing this cute baby.
That's my baby. Yeah, her name's Rhett. She's 18 months old, so she keeps me busy. Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm trying to get home to. So.
So he's like, stop asking questions.
Yeah. No, does anybody have any questions? No.
No, great, thank you.
Cool. Awesome. All right.
That's what we've been to.
Thanks, guys.